Rich in Georgia, who, well, I'll let you go ahead and answer your question, George.
Yeah.
Or excuse me, Rich.
Hey, guys. How's it going? Thanks for taking my call. My question is, let's just say hypothetically, when you die, you are in the presence of God and discover that Christianity is true and that you are cast into hell for all of eternity. Do you think that that would be fair?
Nope.
What would be the reasons
Why not?
for me being cast into hell? That would why would I be cast into hell? For me to evaluate whether it's fair or not. My sin?
Yeah, your sin.
Did the people in heaven sin?
Yes, but they've accepted Christ, and so their sins have been forgiven.
Oh, so it's not about the sin; it's about the belief.
Correct.
Okay.
We all sinned. That's Romans 3:23, right, or 6:23.
So
Romans 3. But the question then would be: so if these people have sinned and I've sinned, then the question is: would me being tortured forever because I didn't have sufficient evidence to justify a belief, is that fair? And I think that that's pretty obviously no.
But that would be your interpretation of sufficient evidence. So some other sinner who believes that they have gotten sufficient evidence and they've repented and believed on Christ, those people would obviously receive heaven.
So is it just then? So if people are gullible enough to believe stuff, should they be in heaven forever while those who had higher evidentiary standards be tortured forever? I think it'd be hard for you to make the case that that's just.
That would negate my original thing where I said it's true. So hypothetically considering that it's true, it wouldn't mean that someone would be gullible to believe the truth. It would be
no. The question of whether something's the question. Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, it's gullible because they didn't have they accepted bad evidence as for something that is true. So it wasn't they had good evidence and made good decisions. They got lucky.
Yeah, the question of whether or not something is justified by evidence and whether it's true or not are two completely separate questions. Something could be true and I could just have no evidence to believe it, right?
True.
Right. So again, it comes down to a question of evidentiary standards. Should people with high enough evidentiary standards to not accept bad claims and lousy evidence, should they be tortured forever? I don't think so.
Even if it is true.
Yes.
Well, yeah, that's the whole thing. If it's true, but I don't have any reason at all to believe it.
God, you would say that God failed to provide sufficient evidence.
Yeah, yes. I'd be going, what the hell, man? and if God wanted to just torture my ass forever, that'd be his prerogative, and he'd be a monster. But yeah, I don't have any reason to believe that the Bible's true.
Right. And considering that a lot of the arguments that are made, a lot of the arguments that are made for God didn't start with Christianity, right? They predate Christianity. Greek philosophers were using them to talk about the Greek gods, and they've been used to talk about other gods. So the arguments for a God, which God, the evidence for God is increasingly is getting smaller every day. That's why we call it God of the gaps, right? Because so many people are willing to say, I don't know, therefore God. We had a caller earlier today whose that was his example. I don't know how this could have happened, therefore something supernatural happened, God did it. And that's not good evidence. And you can't just say
listen to the whole episode, but
well, no, and you don't have to. It's just
for instance, or human history, there have always been people that believed in God. So the writings of the Bible are thousands and thousands of years old. So
people have always believed stuff. People have people believe things, but that has nothing to do with whether the things they believe are true.
Yeah, I mean, people believed in a flat Earth, and there are people who still believe in a flat Earth and round sun and round planets. So
crazy.
Yeah. So that belief in something doesn't necessarily make it true. And that's what we're looking for, is good, solid evidence that a God or gods exist.
And since you brought up Romans,
what you're saying is, if when you pass away, and if, let's say hypothetically that it is true, and you stand before God, and God says, well, I gave you my word, I gave you my son, and you denied him, what would you say at that point? You would just have to say, oh, okay.
You gave us a book.
I'll tell you.
You gave us a book.
I'll tell you exactly what I would say. I would say hang on. I'll tell you what I would say. I would say, all right, look, you gave us this book, right? Made up of 66 other sub books, right? So you gave us this book. So irrelevant. All right. So you asked the question, I'm going to answer it. I would say you gave us this book, okay, that makes all kinds of metaphysical and spiritual and supernatural claims, and there was no evidence to believe any of it. There were these gospels that said that your son came and did all this stuff, and there was no reason to believe any of it. And then if I read further, Romans says all have sinned and fall short of the glory of God. It says the wages of sin is death. And then in Ephesians, it says, for by grace we are saved through faith, and not of ourselves. It is the gift of God, not of works, lest any man should boast. So if you knew, God, that faith was this necessary component that had to come to you, to my sinful ass, because I couldn't have it on my own, why wouldn't you give me either the evidence or the faith if you wanted to have a relationship with me, is what I would say.
Because of free will.
Bullshit.
He also gave you free will.
Yeah, that doesn't work.
No,
the devil has free will too.
And the people who God gives the gift of faith to, is he violating their free will by doing that? Did God violate Paul's free will when Jesus appeared to him on the road to Damascus, according to the book of Acts? Come on. People pull this free will thing right out of their asses, and it has nothing to do with any of the stuff that I just said.
Yeah. And we could look at, Leviticus 14, where God attempts to give us a way to cleanse ourselves from defiling skin diseases, none of which would work except cleaning. Being clean might actually help in some cases, depending on what you cleaned your skin with, but nothing in Leviticus 14 is medically sound. So why would he give us something? I mean, why wouldn't he explain germ theory of disease, or give us a set of chemicals that would actually clear up leprosy or some other skin disease, rather than what he gave us? That makes absolutely no sense whatsoever.
But you do understand that the idea is that sin is what caused those skin diseases and any kind of death.
Yeah, except we have the germ theory of disease. Right. So guess what? That doesn't actually do anything. And oh, by the way, the ritual is a cleansing ritual. And from what I'm reading here, the sacrifices actually happen after, or I don't know. Anyway, looks like the sacrifices happen after, in celebration of the fact that they're now clean. But again, we have the germ theory disease. I can give you a disease at will just by exposing you to the right pathogen. But, so sin has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, Rich, let's cut to the chase, man. What's the evidence? Why should anybody care what the Bible has to say about anything? Right? And you can pick the gospel, pick the resurrection, pick whatever you want. Like, why should anybody care?
Well, people do care.
Why should they care? Was the question.
Where the majority of people do care.
So what? Why should people care? Was the question. So I try to answer it. Why should anybody care about what the Bible has to say about anything?
So that they can go to heaven when they die?
Well, the Bible says that that's the key to heaven, but why should anybody care?
Because it's true.
Okay, that would be a great reason. Okay, so what's the evidence?
The book itself and the history.
No, the book's the claim.
And obviously,
what's the evidence? What the book is a collection of claims. What's the evidence to support the claim?
There's historical evidence that Jesus.
There's historical evidence that when you die, you go to heaven if you believe a certain set of claims.
Well, we can't really know that because nobody's ever come back from the dead except for, Lazarus and stuff like that. But
well, again, a book says Lazarus came back and Jairus's daughter, right? There's people who come back from the dead in a book, but why should anybody believe any of that shit? That's the question, man.
Well, what I'm saying is if you stake your claim on that, if you were to get to heaven, or I mean, if you were to stand before God and he says, okay, you accepted my son and you get into heaven, fantastic. If you deny all of that, then you go to hell. And so I'm wondering if that happens to you, are you going to be like irritated with that? Are you going to be, you know, like,
yeah, I'm going to be pretty annoyed. Well, let me ask you this. What is going to happen if you die and you get to the pearly gates and the angel Moroni is there and is like, we sent the message to Joseph Smith and your ass didn't convert. You weren't a Mormon. What the hell, man? We gave you the book.
Is that what
are you going to say?
I haven't really fully studied the Mormon religion, so I don't know.
What are you talking about? You haven't studied the Book of Mormon? Aren't you aware that people believe that that is the final testament of Jesus Christ? How come you're not studying it right now?
Just seems so obscure.
Well, who gives a shit about it? People believe it. People organize their lives around it. Yeah. Really, very polite, well-groomed people are gathering in temples as we speak with all of their kids, and they believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet. What happens if you get to heaven and heaven is full of Mormons?
Yeah, but if you look at the history of Joseph Smith, it's pretty obvious that he was a charlatan.
Oh, but God works through broken human beings all the time.
Noah was a drunk. Paul persecuted Christians.
Yeah. And you know, they'll leave that out.
David was an adulterer.
So when you look at the Bible versus the Book of Mormon, you hold them to be as equally just awful. Like you
no, not awful.
No.
And I wouldn't even say they're equally implausible. I would say the Book of Mormon is definitely less plausible than the Bible because it is the Bible plus a bunch of other unjustified bullshit. So yeah, it's just making extra claims. So that makes it even less likely to be true. But the bottom line is it's all equally unsubstantiated by evidence.
But the Book of Mormon doesn't have the same history as the Bible.
That is correct.
You know,
that has nothing to do with whether it's true.
Really,
the Bible doesn't have anywhere near the history that Zeus does, or the Egyptian gods do, or the Hindu gods do, the Vedas, right? So the fact that something's been around for thousands of years doesn't make it any more or less true.
Yeah, the other guy was talking about Anunnaki. That shit's in the Sumerian deities, right? That's older than the Bible. Not convinced, man. It's because it all boils down to evidence, right?
And the Bible is the claim, and there are a number of claims in the Bible that are demonstrably untrue. And some of the claims that you can, and some of the things that some people claim are true, other people claim aren't true. And the only way that I have been able to figure out who is right is to stack up the number of Bible verses, count them up, and whoever has the most Bible verses in support of their position might be more correct. And I don't think that is a good way to determine if anything is right. Yeah. And I don't think it's a good way to get to the truth of the Bible.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, so do you think that there will be any inkling when you are like on your deathbed that you will potentially either be worried or just say like, well, here we go, we're going to find out. You know what I mean?
I won't even say, here we go. We'll find out, because I am really, really convinced that the odds of any God existing are so close to zero, it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah. I had to really think about this a few years ago because, Rich, so a few years ago, my dad passed away, and he had Alzheimer's, and it was like a long thing. It was really terrible. And it was the first death that was really close to me since I had left Christianity. And I was thinking about it differently, because it was the first time that someone really close to me that I loved died, and I didn't have any expectation that I was ever going to be reunited with this person. I didn't have any expectation they were going to an afterlife. It's just, that's it. Dad's gone. Someone asked me, where did your dad go where do you think your dad went when he died? And I was like, well, his ashes are in an urn in Riverside, California. That's where he went when he died. You know, and that's pretty much it. And, you know, I've had brushes with death. I had two sort of nearly died when I was in the Army, two experiences. And, you know, shit happens. But like, there's this myth of like, there's like the no atheists and foxholes thing. And that's just bullshit, because many of us, we really, really do. And I know this is hard for a lot of religious folks to wrap their heads around. We really do just try to proportion our beliefs to the evidence. So as we're laying there, as the clock is counting down, we're probably going to be spending more time just thinking about our friends and our family than wondering about the promise of some afterlife that's completely unjustified.
Well, I'm sorry to hear about your dad's passing. And
it's all good, man.
You know, was he a believer?
Yep.
Okay. And so, did you find any comfort in that at all, or?
No.
Like, you said you were a former believer. Like, was that just a hard stop? You know, like you're just like, you're not at all to.
No. What happened was, so I'll tell this very, very briefly. So I was in the Army. I was going to a church in North Carolina where they were doing like a read through the Bible, Genesis to Revelation thing. And I just started asking questions about whether I really had good reasons to believe the stuff that I believed. And that was the pathway out of Christianity for me, was just recognizing, shit, I don't have good reasons to believe any of this stuff. And then I was just a theist. I was like, oh, but there has to be something out there. And I did that bullshit for a little bit. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, I don't have any reason to think that either. And I landed on atheism. And now here we are a decade later. Yeah. That's it, man.
Yeah. I mean, I'm curious as to how people's minds work, especially when that goes, because, in fact, this is the third time I've called the show. And the last time I called, it was many years ago, but, I did get into a conversation. I think it was with Jen, about the afterlife, you know, and she said that atheists don't really have any firm stance on the afterlife. It's more about whether a God exists or not. So I understand that, but
you could be an atheist and still believe that there's like some sort of soul or some sort of other realm or some bullshit like that. Yeah, you could be like, there's no God, but I think there's an afterlife. You could do that, but you just wouldn't have any justification as far as I can tell.
Right. But my question, though, is just like, if it is true and you find this out, are you going to be pissed? Are you going to be like, well, I just, you know, God provided some evidence, but it wasn't sufficient enough for me, so I made my choice and I have to live with that. You know what I mean?
I wouldn't say pissed. I would say mortified, because I wouldn't be alone. There would be who knows how many millions of people who had been born in circumstances where they, you know, believed a different religion or were atheists or whatever, and they didn't believe in the correct God, really through no fault of their own. They're still going to be accountable to this God and this sort of twisted narrative of eternal torture. So yeah, I think more than anything, I'm just going to be like, God, this is horrific. And that'll be that. I'll be powerless to do anything about it.
Yeah, I mean, I had that question or that line of thought, especially when I was in college and started learning about world religions and knowing that God is a loving God and being concerned with people that had grown up in a society that adopted a false religion. And I thought surely God would reveal himself to each individual in his own terms and their own terms. But then I read portions of the Bible that talked about how God curses generations even because of the sins of their forefathers. And unfortunately, that's just part of it, you know?
Well, I mean, the good news is there's just no reason to think any of that stuff is true. But Rich, I appreciate the call very much. I hope you have a great rest of your weekend. And we're gonna move on to other homies. Jim, do you have any final thoughts on like what if?
Yeah, I kind of got one that was asked in chat that I'm kind of curious about. Let's assume for a moment that we have somebody who ends up with Alzheimer's and has no memory of them being a great Christian, however you want to define great, I don't care. They're a great Christian, they get Alzheimer's and they completely forget that they were ever Christian. They don't remember believing in God, and they can't remember anything for longer than 10 or 15 seconds. Does that person go to heaven because they no longer believe in God? technically?
I mean, gosh, depends on your soteriology. This brings up an interesting question, though, because I remember the last time I spent some time with my dad. I mean, he was gone mentally, and I sat with him. He was in an assisted living home, and I was at a table, and I put my hand on his arm, and I'm just talking to him. And when I first came into the room, he was kind of agitated, and he relaxed. He started smiling, and he ended up just kind of falling asleep in his chair. And a nurse came over and was like, "Oh, see, he knows it's you. Somewhere deep down, he knows it's you." And I know what she was trying to do. She's trying to tell me something comforting that'll make me feel nice. But there's no reason to think that my dad knew who I was at that point in time. And I didn't fire back at this nurse. I wasn't like, "Really, let's talk about epistemology." Like we didn't do that. It was just like, "Oh, yeah, have a good one." And then me sitting there going, I don't have any reason to think that. And there is the question that we get confronted with all the time as atheists of like, well, wouldn't it be better to believe the comforting thing? Wouldn't it be better to believe the thing, even if you don't have evidence for it? And I don't think so. I just don't think that there's any justification for that. So anyway,